Hello and welcome to Tuned In. This is brought to you by Gramophone and Worldwide Stereo. We're glad to have you here, and we have got a really fantastic show for you today. We're going to be talking with Andy Kerr of Bowers and Wilkins, and you'll see pretty soon Andy is absolutely the man at Bowers and Wilkins, and I don't know how they would get anything done without this guy. And then after Andy speaks, we're going to have a couple of really awesome engineers and great friends, Jim and Ulrike, Jim Anderson and Ulrike Schwarz. They're incredible engineers, and they own a company called Anderson Audio. Wonderful, wonderful people, and we'll introduce those in just a little while. Right now, I'd like to introduce my friend and co-host, Joe Finn. How are you doing, Joe?
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks a lot for being here. We've got quite a show today, huh?
Oh my gosh, I feel like a kid that's all jacked up on Mountain Dew. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun. We actually did we were actually we did the world premiere of the Abbey Road 801 not long ago, and we'll show you some pictures of that in just a little while. But I think instead of us, talking a lot about what's going to happen during the show, we should just go ahead and bring our friend Andy Kerr on.
Great idea.
Yeah, guys, Andy is he's in product planning, communication, brand messaging, and he also was very key in the Bowers and Wilkins setup with BMW, the automobile company. Have you ever heard one of those systems, Joe?
Oh yeah, they're incredible.
They're absolutely fantastic. In fact, I just when I came to Maryland last time, I rented a BMW, and it had a Bauer system in there. So I find myself driving around like an extra 30 minutes, just to hear the system. The thing sounds so incredible. But hey, without further ado, let's bring in our fancy friend from England.
Fancy
Andy.
friend from England. That's an interesting intro.
Well, you are a fancy friend. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Obviously, in my subtle and understated front room here with the no, this is not really. This is one of our listening rooms here in the UK that we use obviously for eval work and demonstration work. It's not at the R&D centre. That is, as you probably are aware, not somewhere that we stick cameras in, because there's a bunch of clever stuff going on there that we don't always reveal to the outside world. But yeah, these are 801s. I'm sure most of you guys watching this will be well aware of that.
Yeah, like one of the most famous speakers in the world for many reasons.
I'd like to think so. I mean, it's one of the great things I find, I'm sure you find the same, David, right, about the audio trade, is there are some great products that have such a storied history across brands, right? I mean, we're not the only brand by a long way that do that. I mean, you could speak to my first turntable, which I'm very proud to say was the Lin LP12. Yeah,
Me too.
Yeah, everybody has a Lin LP12. True to audio, it's one of those things. It's like a rite of passage, right? And the 801 is the same. It's 45 years since we installed a pair in Abbey Road Studios. 46 years since they first launched. It's been one of those things. Clearly, it's evolved along the way. I'm not saying these are the originals, not by a long way. We've done lots of different versions, lots of different iterations, but it's still exciting to have a product that's got that kind of storied history behind it.
Yeah. We just did as I was saying before, we just had an incredible event at Gramophone and then Worldwide. We were privileged to do the world premiere of the speaker, and wow, we had such a fantastic time at these events.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a nice story. It's a good story for us. The fact that the product's been there and used continuously by Abbey Road Studios, alongside, I should say, several other recording studios across the world as well, is a source of great pride. The idea that Mr. Bowers himself delivered that very first pair, alongside our then chief acoustic engineer, a gentleman called Steve Rowe, to Abbey Road Studios in 1980 is wonderful. You have to put yourself in the context of the product, right? And the idea of the product. It was something that he'd been working on for 3 years. It's something I think conceptually he'd been working on pretty much since the foundation stone of the business in 1966. He wanted to make a loudspeaker that was sufficiently good for it to be used by the demanding professional and also the most discerning home listener. And I'm trying my best to quote that because that's pretty much the first paragraph in the original brochure of the product. And it's not easy to do that, right? Oftentimes what you find is you make a loudspeaker for the home user, but it doesn't have the power handling requirements, or it has other constraints that make it not appropriate for use in a professional environment. I often get asked, by the way, David, about the Nautilus, which of course is wonderful and it's beautiful and I love it and everybody who hears it loves it. I'd be real, a Nautilus wouldn't last 5 minutes in the studio. It would break into 100 bits the first time you try to move it because it's just not built for that, right? What's cool about the 801 and the 800 in general is it's both high performance and accessible, serviceable, robust, durable. I mean, Joe, you probably know, right? I mean, if something goes wrong on an 801, you can take the crossover off in like 2 minutes.
That's right.
You can change the high frequency in 3-4, and if you get quick at it because you've been practiced like we are, it becomes like a 1 minute operation. And that's not because we think the product is going to break in the hands of the home consumer, because likely it's not going to. It's because every single second of studio time costs money.
That's right.
You know, if you're with a speaker and it's in a studio and it's down for some reason, then you have AN world leading band sitting there in a corner kind of scowling at you going, what's going on? Why can't we work? So we had to engineer the thing from the get-go to be that extra bit, say, durable, accessible, serviceable, repairable, as well as high performance. And that, I think, has been the foundation stone of our success in our relationship with especially places such as Abbey Road. So the model that you just showed, the limited edition model, is I love it. I love the story. It's a collaborative project. We worked on it together with them to create something that's kind of unique and celebratory for the story of the space. There's no technical changes. I think you probably know that, but just to be clear, it is the same as the 801 signature. It's purely about the uniqueness of the finish and also the really cool book that we created that goes with the product.
You know, one of the things I was going to mention, Andy, is you were talking about the durability of the 801s and the 800 series in general, and that's why it is appropriate actually for a recording studio. But we were talking with Ulrike yesterday just briefly, and she mentioned there are a lot of really good sounding home speakers that would not be appropriate for the recording studio because they bring a certain warmth or a certain characteristic that the listener really enjoys, but they're not really accurate or really true to what you're hearing. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very purist perspective, Joe, and I guess, if I'm honest, that not everybody fully digs it, and that's fine. I get it, I understand. But an 800 series, right from the start, in fact, every Bowers Wilkins loudspeaker, but especially an 800 series, is designed to be as faithful as it can possibly be to the outcome of the control room, the recording. And the problem with that, of course, is if the recording has a certain character to it, or if the performance has a certain trait to it, that's what you hear. There's no sugar coating, you know, there's no kind of like Vaseline on the lens to kind of soften the impact of what you're hearing. It's definitely everything on the recording for better, or perhaps even in some cases for worse. But John's perspective right at the start was that's not our fault. That's the outcome of the recording. That's what you're hearing. That's what we're going to try and deliver. So we bear that in mind all the way through. The product is designed as best as we can possibly make it to be as true, as we like to say, to the original recording as it's possible to be. And we feel that for the audience that wants that, it's the ideal solution. And I go back to my earlier point, and you nailed it just then with what you said. Not everybody does. And we're okay with that. We accept that. It's like saying, you know, if you want to hurl yourself through a corner fast on a racetrack, you need a certain kind of car. If you want that same car to kind of carry your family on a family holiday, you need a different kind of car. You know, we're making the race car. That's what we're trying to do.
Love that analogy.
I like to drive race cars with my family, Andy.
Yeah, I can see that disturbed look in the back seats from the family as they're going, why is Daddy going through the corner quite so quickly? Let's talk about the finish. The red and the brown is an interesting one, and I guess in the initial phases, before we'd kind of first explain it out to people, there would be some colleagues who were kind of going, wow, that's different. Because they were kind of used to, for example, the Midnight Blue Metallic that we have over here. The important point was it was pretty carefully chosen, right? There are some incredibly characterful instruments in Abbey Road Studios. As you probably know, and you probably heard me say before, I've been very privileged to go there a bunch of times, and believe me, the thrill of going there still doesn't pull even after all of these years. But all around the place, everywhere you go, there are decades old, super characterful instruments, you know, in some cases instruments that, you know, bands such as the Beatles and Pink Floyd have genuinely played. And the fact that you can touch it yourself and play it yourself, kind of, wow. So we created the finish. It's called Vintage Walnut, kind of in a homage to them. And the red is, we worked with the guys there to try and color match the leather to the very famous and very iconic seats that you use, or the artists use, in Studio One. If you ever see the assembled imagery of all the orchestra and all the performers in Studio One, they have these very iconic red leather seats that they all sit to, some of which have this incredible kind of time-worn patina of all the use and all the time that's been used sitting on them. So we worked with them. They sent us this tiniest fragment. I'm not joking, guys. It was tiny, of the original leather from one of these chairs, because obviously the chairs are pretty much priceless, right? They didn't want to kind of damage one of them. And we worked with our supplier, which is a British company, Leather by Connolly, to try and color match it. So it is, as best we can, representative. So that's the reason behind the choices. That's what informs them.
And how did the conversation actually come about in the first place to do a commemorative edition? Because, you know, obviously that wasn't done, let's say, at the 40th anniversary of your collaboration with Abbey Road. So how did you decide on that?
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, that's a great question. And the reason simply for the 40th is that was the height of COVID. And there was also a bunch of other, at that point, new product conversation going into just literally trying to get the challenge of getting the 800 through the door. We had the new generation out at that time, D4, in the works, and the team was kind of within the limits of what we were allowed to do in that era, kind of working flat out to get that work out the door. So this essentially came up because alongside a bunch of the other guys, we have very good relationships with some of the engineers who work there, some of the senior people who work there. And we just thought, you know, we felt it was time, right? I mean, there's also a concern, I guess, with the passage of each year that some of the people who can kind of speak to or give us insight into that original moment, that original 1980, 1981 kind of period, are for whatever reason sadly no longer with us. So we thought we didn't want to leave it until the 50th, you know, just in case there was risk that it kind of stepped out of people's minds. So we thought this felt like the right time to kind of celebrate that story and kind of bring it to the forefront. And I'll be honest with you, Joe, it's not, it might sound, you might not believe it, but it's not specifically about selling more product. I think it's just trying to surface the story of what the 800 series diamond is, and what it represents. I mean, I often say, particularly to colleagues who join our business for the first time, have you ever heard a pair of these loudspeakers? And of course they go, no, they have not heard anything like it. And okay, you kind of unwittingly you have. You just probably didn't appreciate it, right? Because if you were in the theater kind of watching Raiders of the Lost Ark or Return of the Jedi, or maybe one of the Harry Potter films, or one of the Lord of the Rings films, or one of the Hobbit films, or a great many of the Marvel's films, all the new Star Wars movies, or Skyfall, or Spectre, or Gravity, or Fury, or Baby Driver, or 1917, or Batman, or Barbie, or Wicked. It just goes on and on and on. All the music scores for those films were created using generations of these loudspeakers. Mm-hmm. You know, these loudspeakers have contributed to, I would say, contemporary popular culture just as greatly as a good guitar. I'll ask David about drums. You know what I mean? There's a real fabric of work that these things have kind of played into, and of course that's excluding music. I'm just talking about music scores here. I mean, if you then bring in Oasis, Radiohead, Muse, whatever you want to do, then clearly we're super excited about all of that. So it's an important thing, I guess, is the point, and that was the story that we wanted to kind of get across. It's not just a machine, it's not just a device. It's something that doesn't just play back music; it's helped to make it too.
It's
Yeah,
one thing to be, it's one thing for a manufacturer to come out and go, hey, we've got great speakers. Every manufacturer does. And there are some really great speakers out there.
Mm.
But it's entirely a different thing when these great speakers that the manufacturer claims are great speakers are used in one great studio, then two great studios, then 10 great studios, then 20 great studios. I mean, it's to me that speaks volumes on. You don't even have to say hardly anything. You could just like show the pictures of all the studios that are
Mm.
using the speakers and all the great engineers that have got such wonderful accolades about why they use them. And I mean, that's just an advertisement in itself. It's really quite impressive.
It is, and I mean, I hope it always comes across. And if it doesn't, I'm going to say it clearly now as well. I want everybody to be very clear. We absolutely have a huge amount of respect for the other audio brands that we're competing with in the space. It's not for one moment to say that we are the only people in the world who know how to make loudspeakers, and it's equally not for one moment to say that our way of doing it is the only way. There's a bunch of really interesting, very cool approaches to audio engineering and different perspectives that you can take on how you believe a loudspeaker should work, from horns and electrostatics through the kind of products that we make, through significantly larger ones. And we've spoken about this before, right? One of the important points about what we do with these, and people need to appreciate this, is they are space constrained. I appreciate I'm sitting next to a pair of loudspeakers that look pretty big, but compared to some of the biggest loudspeakers that you can buy, especially in the US, they're really not that big, right?
yeah.
You stand next to some of the brands, I won't name them, but you guys all know what I'm talking about. There are some speakers that get way bigger than this. The reason that this is a different approach is this thing has to fit into a recording studio. And that's always been the case right from the start, right from the get-go. It was designed to fit behind a console as well as fit into your front room. And that's always set the limits. I say that because sometimes we get asked, why don't you make a bigger one? We could make a bigger one, but the regard in Abbey Road and other studios would go, well, that's no use.
That's right.
So,
You're
so
clearly
what
not
we can do-
American.
Yeah, Andy, there's a question I've been wanting to ask you about. Obviously, you first introduced 800 series back in 1979, and now we're on the D4 series. And I'm sure that you can recount for us a story or two about, manufacturers can hit aha moments where they realize, oh, we really need to bring out a whole nother series here because our engineering team has uncovered something that we can make this part of it that much better. Can you kind of just share with us, if you've got a story or two from the evolution of the 800 series to what it was in 79 and what it is now?
There's hundreds of them. I mean, first I want to really get this point across. The 800 series consumes the entire pretty much collective effort of the entire engineering team, but also a lot of my colleagues in manufacturing as well. It's 100% a cumulative collective effort. It's not the output of one or two people. For us as a business, we treat it almost as like our ride to the moon. It's definitely something that we're trying to advance and improve with each generation. If you want a series of different insights into it, let's go with the first one, which was just the original thing. I mean, the original thing in its own right in 1979 was quite unusual. Basically, prior to that, John was making a loudspeaker called DM6, which was the first what was called like phase coherent loudspeaker with like the three main units arranged in kind of like a stepped configuration with the high frequency and then the mid and then the LF arranged like that. And then it kind of had a sort of stepped front to it. Internally, it's called the Pregnant Penguin. You have to see it. It's a very unusual loudspeaker. A year later, he did the DM7, which is the first tweeter on top model. And basically, the 1979 801 combined those two principles, in other words, a separated high frequency enclosure, and then the main drive units in kind of a step configuration, with the additional insight of having the mid-range in its own separated enclosure as well. So I guess the first pivot point with 801 full stop is 3 separated enclosures, and each in such a position, such a configuration that we can play around with how they align in time. From that, undoubtedly, Curve Cabinet, 1998. That was a super challenging thing for the team to do because internally we weren't really set up to do that, right? We had the ability to do kind of mitered wooden joinery really well, but we didn't really have the ability to curve cabinets in the way that we wanted to try and do. So eventually the team wound up reaching out to a company called Ludvigsen in Scandinavia, in Denmark, and they specialized in making curved wood furniture. And working with them, we kind of solved the conundrum of how to do that. So the 1998 era product was very iconic in terms of how it looked and became a kind of standard point for some 17 odd years of the design. But that would be a big step change. Next is diamond, which is wild as a technology, 2005. Gary Jeeves, who's moved across to Apple after he left us, was the kind of leader behind that technology. What a phenomenal piece of development work that was. The idea of like working in the same way as we were already working with materials such as aluminium, but like taking it to the next level with a material that's ultimately even lighter, even stiffer, but hugely challenging and complex to produce. But that was the real breakthrough from a transparency perspective. And then in my time at the company, undoubtedly two for me, Continuum, the silver mid-range cone technology. You wouldn't believe the amount of angst that went on internally within the company when we were moving away from the preceding material that we were commonly associated with, the yellow material. You all know what it is, but I have to call it a polyaromatic aramid fiber because we no longer have the rights to call it the name that everybody calls it. That material, and that change was huge, not the least in which is what we were going to call it, but that was an interesting project in its own right. But this is something that was a huge insight in terms of transparency and clarity through the mid-range. And then in 21, the new suspension, the biomimetic suspension, the piece that goes behind that, again through the mid-range, which basically replaced the traditional fabric spider. And again, the transparency, the realism through the mid that you get from introducing that was still spine tingling. And I still, even now that I say it, recall that first moment that we heard it and just almost just like jumped out the chair with a sense of like, where has that been all my life? So there'll be more. There's always more. I'm talking a lot, I'm conscious, but there's always more, because that's how it is, right? I think, David, you've heard me say this before, Joe, I'm going to say it to you. One of my favorite expressions about all engineers, you're only as good as the lens that you can look through today, right? When Giotto and anybody else, Galileo, was looking up at the night sky in the Middle Ages through a telescope, then the lens that they're looking through is their defining limit. If they can't see to the other end of the solar system, it didn't make them idiots. It just meant that that was the limit of what they could see. The great advantage that we enjoy is our lenses get better. And as each generation happens, we can see more. And as we see more, we can fix more. So I think it's exciting. It's always been exciting that each new generation of what we do gets better. And I'm no doubt whatsoever that it's going to continue to do so.
Andy, one of my favorite parts of this whole story really is that from my own manufacturing background, because I spent most of my adult life doing that, when the engineers have a platform that they're evolving and evolving and evolving, you've been evolving this platform for 45 years. And I think it does really give you an advantage versus kind of starting completely over on some other platform, because you can become more and more aware of, well, what might be the weaknesses we had before, and how do we go about fixing them. So I love that you shared this part of the story with us.
Well, again, I mean, we're fortunate, right, Joe, because we've got a strong mandate that came right down to us from the top, from the boss, from John, going back a long time. And he basically said, make a better product. He didn't say, make a product with a better margin, or make a product that had a different design statement each time, or make a bigger one, or make a one that was capable of higher SPL. He didn't even constrain it in technical terms. He just said, better. And the great thing about that is it really opens up the gamut of what you can do. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of approach better in 101 different ways. From my personal perspective, working with my colleagues in the product team at different times over the course of my period at Bowers, that's always been both a blessing and a challenge, right? Because, of course, it's so open-ended that sometimes you find everybody's just obsessing about minutiae. They're obsessing about things that you guys would not believe that we would obsess about, but they do, because if it can be made better, then they'll try.
Yeah.
Couple of things. Of course, we did the world premiere of this speaker not long ago, a few weeks ago, and just a comment. We took a lot of pictures. You guys took a lot of pictures. The pictures just don't even come close to what these things really look like
Mhm.
in real life. They're absolutely luxurious. This was the first time I got to hear a pair of the D4 Diamonds, believe it or not, was
Mhm.
at this event that we were at, and I was absolutely blown away. Well, I'm still doing some work for Cobus, and I just did a show a couple of weeks ago,
Mhm.
and there were the 804s were hooked up along with the Marantz Model 10,
Mhm.
and there were maybe, I don't know, 60, 70 rooms in this show, and this was by far, I was blown away. It was by far the best sound that I heard at the show, and I actually put that up on my social pages
Yeah, I saw.
because,
Thank you for that. Yeah.
well, it's not even thank you, because if I something else would have sounded better, I would have put that something else in there. But these guys took a lot of care and attention to this room, and it was it was an unbelievable setup. I just want to shout out to the guys at Audio Quest because they're the
Mhm.
ones who did it,
Yeah.
and they just did a fantastic job. So not only I think did the top end speakers benefit from all of these improvements that you guys make, but that absolutely trickles down to the lower stuff.
Well,
And
I mean, I can add some color to that, right? I mean, if you think about, and I know you've spent time in studios, if you think about a typical studio combination, you have a near field and you have a far field, right? A near field monitor is an element that you would use to work on vocal strands on a dialogue or a guitar track or piano track or something like that, and you would work on getting that right, and you'd monitor that in an individual sense. And then when you felt that you were happy with what it did, you'd combine it and perhaps throw it into the mix and then push it to the far field monitor, and you try and listen to the full range of the whole track with every element combined. Now, oftentimes in studios, they'll use clearly something like the Yamaha NS10. I'm sure you've seen that everywhere. There's a bunch of other good monitors that get used for near fields.
I
But
prefer
quite
the
clearly,
aura tones myself.
well, yeah, I mean, and quite clearly what we hope often happens with us with 801s is people use 805s. Now, the salient point with that is the 805 is a 6.5-inch two-way design. It's like an 18-liter, forgive me, I don't know the imperial measurements, 18-liter measurement internally. It's not a huge cabinet, but it needs to, as best as we can, approximate to the sound of an 801. If it sounded distinctly different, if it was distinctly less insightful, less full of resolution, then you couldn't work with it from a professional environment perspective. So, David, what I'm trying to say is the biggest model and the smallest model are a team. They get used together as a team.
I
And
can
what that,
echo that so well. In fact, with the at the event that we had, of course, Kevin was using the 801s. Well, the first event that we used, I was in a little smaller room. I ended up, believe it or not, using the 805s, and they just did fantastically. Everybody really enjoyed the presentation because it was really my part was, it was more about the music than anything else. Andy, you know me, we that's what Andy and I talk about probably more than anything else. And you spent a good bit of time at Abbey Road Studio.
Mhm.
You told me a story the other day that I found, I just loved the story. It really doesn't have a lot to do with the 801s, but would you mind telling us the little story you
Yeah,
told me the other
yeah,
day?
sure. I mean, it sounds terrible now. I sound like a name dropper, right?
Oh,
I said before, right, the place kind of oozes music soul. It's like the fabric of music when you walk through the door, just wants to talk to you. I mean, there's pianos in the corner that, like Lennon played. There's instruments over here that, were used to record pieces from Harry Potter and stuff. But one of my all-time favorite experiences was in Studio 2. I guess that would have been 2011, maybe 2012. A really good friend of mine by the name of Sean McGee, who works up there doing remastering work. He had spent pretty much 2.5 years of his life remastering the Beatles' back catalogue. Some of you guys might recall in that period, the Beatles' early tracks, early albums were remastered to bring them kind of effectively, presentationally into line with the later albums. The early albums in their original stereo mixes pretty much had the band in this speaker and the vocal track over here. And it's kind of alien. It sounded unusual to people coming to it in the more modern world, but clearly what we have is that, the soundstage. So he was doing that. It was incredibly demanding, time-consuming work. He agonized over it. the end game was 2000. I'm going to say it's 2012. We were doing a piece with EMI. They were going to be the world debut premiere performance of these records. We had a bunch of great music journalists invited. We had a hosted event inside Studio 2. We had a pair of 800 D2, it would have been at the time, set up in the room. And we were going to do a live playback of these records. And basically along the way, the music journalists and some of the performers that were involved were going to talk about what was going on, kind of discuss their favorite Beatles cuts. The journalists obviously were going to have a great time listening to it and all the rest of it. So earlier in the day, I'm doing the setup, and I'm with Sean, and we're just the two of us, and we're listening to these records for the first time. Let me tell you, just as a side point, you don't normally listen to a pair of speakers like this inside a live room. You only listen to them in a control room. So when you're listening to them in the live room, you get the sound of the acoustic of the space. And it sounds phenomenal because you've got all of that air alongside the speakers, and it just becomes like a transcendental thing. And we're listening to Beatles records. I mean, can you get any more wild than that? We're listening to the Beatles album, Abbey Road, in Abbey Road Studio 2, where they recorded the record. And I'm really conscious I want Sean to be happy. He seemed pretty happy. And at one point he said, I'm going to go and get a coffee. Do you want one? I went, yeah, man, sure. So he headed out, and I'm now completely by myself in Studio 2, listening still to Abbey Road. And such a special moment. And I will confess I had a little sing. And I can't claim to be the world's greatest singer, but you have to kind of enjoy the moment, right? And I was aware of this voice joining in over my shoulder, kind of here. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was Sean, and I turned around, and it was Paul McCartney. And I'm literally now like, just like the world's best goldfish impersonation guy, like that. And he just said, I guess I should have been involved with this, really, shouldn't I? And went through the door, just kind of went out the door. And I just still like, did that? What? And I said to David, like when you have these things in your mind, like, did I just dream that? Was that like some super fever dream or something like that? Was my mind just taking me places? And I spoke to Jeremy, who has become a very dear friend of mine, who at the time was, I guess, the artist liaison. I can't remember his exact job role, but now he's the general manager of Abbey Road. It's an incredible rise for him. And I said, did that really happen? And he went, yeah, he did. I'm outside the door. McCartney walks up to the door. He goes, who's in there? He says, it's the Bowers guy doing a sound check. And he just walked through the door. So, claim to fame. I sang Close Harmonies with the Beatles for about 5 seconds in Abbey Road.
Hey, that's more than most of us could say. That's quite a story. Hey, listen, we don't have much more time because we got a couple of folks we're bringing in. But Joe and I were wondering, we were talking about this prior to having you on, and Joe and I both wondered, what's Andy's favorite recording from Abbey Road?
Oh my word. Wow. Okay, from Abbey Road or from Abbey Road that features our speakers, because that's a different conversation.
From Abbey Road featuring.
From Abbey Road, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here.
Oh, yeah, God, that's absolutely great choice.
I'm a big Pink Floyd fan anyway, right? But then that particular recording, there's, again, quick story. I want to tell you this one. They mostly worked in 3. They occasionally did a few pieces in 2. Sorry, Studio 3, Studio 2. The consoles that they were working with at the time didn't have enough delay time, RT time, to kind of create the spaciousness of the sound that they wanted for the opening of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. So the solution was they hired one, which was hardly being used much at the time, which is a massive space. It's normally where you put 84, 85 orchestral members, and they do stuff like scores for music, for feature films. And they put basically Dave Gilmour at one end, and then they put the mics at the other end. And so that opening piece that everybody knows on that track, where you hear kind of that haunting guitar and it's going ding, 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 ding. What you're hearing is essentially the RT time of the length of Studio 1.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a great story, Andy. I can't tell you how much Joe and I both appreciate you taking your time to be here. We know how terribly busy you are. So it's always just a privilege just to talk to you, but to call you friend is quite quite an honor for me.
Oh my word, come on now. I mean, again, I just want to re-emphasize, I am just one of an incredibly talented team, and most of the people that I know are significantly more clever than me, so please don't big me up. It's a privilege to work for this company. I'm very happy to hang out and kind of follow up with any questions if needed. In the meantime, thank you so much for having me on.
Andy, thanks so much for being here. We both of us really appreciate it.
And thank you for sharing those stories, Andy. The Paul McCartney one just cracks me up.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's see. We need to take Andy off stage. Where is that? Producers, give me a hand here.
Sure, Charlie can do it. There we go.
Well, that was pretty cool. What a great
Awesome.
guy. Yeah. He's so much fun to talk to. You start talking to Andy. It's just like the other day we got in touch with each other, and I was going to call him up and just give him a 5-minute rundown on what we were going to do. And like an hour and a half later, and this is like, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, his time. So like an hour and a half later, we're saying goodbye, and I'm telling him thanks for joining us. And what an incredible person. Joe, the next couple of guys we have on our show are just as big of an honor as Andy, huh?
Absolutely.
We got Jim Anderson and Ulrike Schwarz, two of the absolute best recording engineers in the world. They hold 13 Grammy awards and like 30 Grammy nominations. These folks they're on such the cutting edge. It's incredible. Jim and Ulrike also have 2 Peabodys. And Jim is president, or he was named president of the AES in 2008. One of the things I really love about Jim is that he's a giver. Well, both of them really are. And when I say he gives back, Joe, this guy is kind of out of the goodness of his heart, as far as I can tell. He's a professor at the Clive Davis Institute at NYU, and he teaches young people how to listen to music. These are folks that I think we want to have these guys on for just a show, just to do a Jim and Ulrike show. What do you think?
Absolutely. And that's a class I'd love to take, by the way, how to listen to music.
It would be a great class. I think that would be
right.
For anyone in audio. These folks, they know so much. They've forgotten more than we'll ever know. And I think both you and I, Joe, have encouraged people in our industry, go listen to live performances, go listen to live music, know what acoustic instruments sound like. Jim and Ulrike absolutely just embellish this. Just to give you a little bit about Ulrike, she's always been a rising star in a male-dominated world. Could you imagine trying to break into the recording industry in Germany when you're basically a kid? Well, Ulrike did that, and she's been incredible the whole time. When I say she's a rising star, she is absolutely a rising star. She spent about 10 years as the lead sound engineer in, I'll never get the name of the studio right, in Munich, a big studio in Munich. And she moved here in 2015 when her and Jim linked up together. All of a sudden, everything just started taking off, and these guys are, it's like Jim said, they get some sort of a Grammy nomination, every few months or every few weeks. So very, very impressive couple. Let's welcome Jim and Ulrike.
Yeah.
To the stage. Hey guys, how are you?
Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Ulrike. We're so glad to have you on here.
Thank you very much. We're very pleased, and we've spent a fair amount of time in the front of being 802s actually at Skywalker.
Yeah, you guys have done a lot of mixing there, right?
We were just counting up. I have between the two of us, we've done like 16 projects at Skywalker, and they've all been on the 802s.
Fantastic.
We were going to have this show last week, and a few things happened, and we just really couldn't technically get it together. Jim and Ulrike, I had called them and, hey guys, can you be on the show? We're going to have it on Wednesday of last week. Well, Jim, immediately says, well, Dave, we're actually going to be at Skywalker Ranch mixing. And I was just about to say, well, I totally get it. But he goes, hey, don't worry about it. We'll just make time. We'll do this. They're wonderful people. And we see them actually a lot of the audio shows, doing talks for normal consumers. People think they know what goes on in the studio, and I'm here to tell you that unless you've done it kind of on a level like these guys have done it, there's no way for you to ever know exactly what these guys go through. But they're the unsung heroes. And personally, I always consider the engineers, the recording engineers and the mastering engineers, as they should be listed as part of the band, because they are absolutely part of the band. What do you think? Am I right or wrong about that, Jim?
George, absolutely. George Martin, the fifth Beatle, right?
Oh, exactly. And we are not only engineering, we're also producing too. So we kind of wear a couple of hats during productions, where we kind of bring our Ulrike and I are both musicians. That's our background, and so we bring a kind of a musical background to anything we engineer, we work on. So we can always sit there and kind of talk with the musician really on their level. Ulrike has a Tonmeister degree from Germany, and I have a music degree from Duquesne University. So, we spent a fair amount of time actually kind of working on our musical chops before we decided to go into engineering.
Tell us, Ulrike, I've been super fascinated with this because I call myself a sound engineer, and I'm a hack. I'm a total hack. I mean, I've been behind the board. I kind of know how things work on a technical level, and I've done some recording and some mixing. But you, on the other hand, from Germany, you would never be called a sound engineer unless you were really a sound engineer. Could you tell us a little bit about what it takes to actually have a degree like you've got in Germany?
Yeah. So my degree, and this might come out a little funny, my degree is actually music producer. So the Tonmeister in its pure and old-timey form is that you basically study music. You have to go through a normal entrance exam to the music university as a musician, and at the same level, they also send you to the technical university for electronics, digital technology, mathematics, and those type of things. So you get a kind of a double degree, but more on the producing level than on the actual engineering level. What I did was I went very early on in my studies. I went to the US, and also to do actually jazz and not just classical music. I'll have to say this degree was 90% for classically trained people. And I actually interned with several sound engineers in the US, and eventually figured out that I kind of preferred the place at the mixing board to the one only being producer with a score, because that was too limited only to classical music, I thought. So when I was actually employed at a national broadcaster called Bavarian Radio, who owns two orchestras, one of them now being conducted by Simon Rattle. He's the chief conductor there, and before him was Maris Janssons, Lorin Maazel, and all these type of people. Then another orchestra and one of the world's most famous choirs. Then you're kind of basically immediately thrown into a very, very high stakes production environment, because like from zero to nothing, you are doing world-class clients, and they are very, as you can imagine, them being German, they're very direct in what they want and what they don't want. So that's kind of and they hired me out of university. So I was very young, and I was a producer sitting in the engineer chair, which was a scandal at that moment. And being a woman was a scandal on top of it. And being young was the perfect storm. But I, of course, within weeks, I had to go from zero to nothing, which was everybody told me in the beginning, you'll do string quartets, chamber music, it's going to be fine. And then everybody went to a convention and it was like, oh no, you're doing actually the magic flute in a studio you've never been in. Thank you. So this is, I mean, this is how it goes. And then you make it, you survive it, it sounds good, and everybody is very happy. But that was partly the training, of course, I received at university, the musical training, and then the actual very practical training that I had gotten in the US by an engineer also called Jim Anderson. He trained me in the 90s to be an engineer, an engineering engineer. So I got basically two courses of study for the price of one. And so yeah, that's how I A, got into engineering, and then B, I'm still using both, also the production chops, of course, because every decision we take, putting up a microphone or not, is informed by both, basically by both lines of study. Yeah.
I like how Ulrike says she's going from zero to nothing.
Yeah.
We knew it.
Well, that's what it's. Yeah, but isn't that what I do?
Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. It's always the same thing.
We always say we're a not-for-profit organization here. So
yeah, that's. I think somebody asked us, like, when we think a project is done. Well, A, when we think it's done, I mean, when it kind of meets our standards, and then B, when the budget has run out. Yeah. Which might not be at the same moment, but yeah. My
daughter's an artist, and she draws some just incredible. In fact, she drew the Jimi Hendrix behind me. She's just an incredible art. And I asked her the same thing. I'm going, how do you know when you're finished? And you go, Dad, just something hits you. You just know that you don't need to make one more stroke of the pen. And you guys, when we talk about art, there's a lot of people that can mix and do really a pretty good job of it. Sometimes it's not super consistent, but there's a lot of really good engineers out there. You guys are some of the most consistent engineers that I know. You guys, Joe, you remember the album Modern Cool, Patricia Barber?
I've not listened to that one, no.
That's like, I think Patricia's probably most famous album, is it not, Jim?
Oh, I think so. Between that and Cafe Blue, they've
sold, yeah, Cafe Blue as well, yeah.
Yeah, they've sold somewhere over a couple of 100,000 copies, yeah.
Yeah, and then Jim and Ulrike just finished with a new one that came out, Click, and this album sounds unbelievable. In fact, I've got it on my my latest playlist. Just absolutely fantastic. And it was not only mixed in stereo. Joe, you had a question, because these guys, they do a fantastic job in stereo, as anyone that's ever heard any of their albums could attest to. But also, these guys are probably the premier multi-channel engineers that I know, like maybe in the world, and we'll talk a little bit about that more. I don't want to just leave that out there, but you had an interesting question, Joe, about the different recording techniques.
Well, yeah, Jim and Ulrike, when I started selling this gear all those decades ago, there was no multi-channel really. The brief thing that happened in the 70s with discrete 4-channel was already gone and left behind. It was really a 2-channel medium, but now with 2-channel listening being so important to so many of our viewers, but also multi-channel listening being so important, how do you approach that dynamic of, first off, just having it clear in your head where you're trying to go, where you're trying to get to, and then secondly, the different techniques that you bring to those two mediums?
Well, I think that, since we both came from broadcasting, I spent almost 10 years at National Public Radio doing live jazz and live classical and live folk and all that kind of thing. And Ulrike, with her experience at Bavarian Radio, I mean, and in both stereo and surround, you have to walk into the session with really a very clear idea of what you want to do. And it comes down to that, and then you have to be flexible enough to change. Because you might be in the studio and you listen and say, that's not working. I have to actually kind of change my approach. So it's really that kind of thing. And then on top of it, it's in multi-channel, It's what really kind of is plausible. What is not going to take your ear away, and you start saying that's not working because, the arrangement may be telling you where to put things. Why is something coming from the back and not coming from the front, if coming from the center? So you really have to kind of, especially if you're working with something that was never intended to be in multi-channel to begin with, you really have to sit musically and listen to the arrangement and see what the arrangement's doing, and how you can make these various relationships between, say, the lead vocal, the background vocal. Jane's project that you just put up, this 16 Sunsets, Jane actually had an idea that she wanted to do something in surround and wanted to do, and so how do you treat a saxophone with piano, bass, and drums in an immersive environment and not make it feel gimmicky? And so what we'll do is we'll try to maybe give you a sense of the drum kit and kind of sit inside this. And then Jane and I'll do something very specific where I'll take 4 microphones and I'll pin down the corners of the room that she's in. And then she's actually playing in the middle of these 4 microphones. And then I'll mic her normally. And then what we do right there is very subtly, you had the sense of being in the room with her, but you hear her very focused in the front, just like you would hear in stereo. And so that approach tends to work with Jane.
Yeah, there's a lot of recordings out there that you hear like the bongo over your right shoulder and the choir over your left shoulder. And I really love being close and intimate with my music, but I don't want to feel like I'm on stage with these guys. For me, it just takes the realism away. But I love the way you guys do it, because it's more ethereal. It's more, this is what you would hear if you were in this studio. But this is not done like most people do it. There are these little tools these days, and anybody can get them. They're free. You can grab a recording and then just start, taking the voice around or taking the drums around, and it's all pretty lo-fi. In fact, most rear channels are extremely lo-fi, if I'm not incorrect with this. And Ulrike built a computer just for this purpose. Could you tell us a little bit about that process, Ulrike?
Yes. When I left the radio, I kind of thought, well, what do I need now? Because I know what the usual professional standards were, and I thought, if you are now on the basically free market, then you need to offer something also that is better than normal. And we came across basically the recording format DXD, which is called Digital Extreme Definition, which is 8 times the sampling frequency of CDs. So that would be 352.8. Also, you can go up to 32-bit. So even as a just 24-bit DXD file, you have 256 times the resolution of CD. So that's, I thought that's good. And DXD translates very good into DSD, which probably most customers know, the digital direct stream digital, and that's as a CD format. And so we thought, okay, we should try it. And our really big first recording with that was this album Higher and Click of Patricia Barber's, and it's a resolution, and you can actually capture audio that you didn't think you wanted or you needed, and a lot of production problems actually go away because you have the resolution finally that you wanted. The computer, it came down to people offering me that I could have 64 channels in DXD, but still I would have to fly a small fridge around. And I said in the year 2019 or 18 that cannot be. We must have evolved from that, because in 1989 I bought my first Sadie 2496, if that tells anybody anything, and that was one of the 2 systems in Berlin that were actually working on that sampling or on that definition. And so I thought, okay, we are 20 years later and you still want me to buy a fridge. And so I got together with a company. We developed the specs for this laptop. And this was the first laptop that steadily would record 64 channels in DXD, and they said it can't be done. It could be done now, and actually just now I'm going to the new laptop. We have improved on that because our visit in Skywalker this week, actually Jim wanted what ended up being 68 or 70 channels, and that was not, the little computer couldn't do it. And now we need to actually, for the moment, put both of them together until we have a new card where one computer can actually do that. But here's Mr. Innovation, who makes us always build new stuff and go over the borders of the last one.
Well, Ulrike, in the few minutes, we got about 5 minutes left or so, I guess. If I could ask you and then Jim the same question for you. You both have been involved quite a bit in recording acoustic music. And so if you don't mind just sharing with us a little bit about how that came to be, how you were drawn to the acoustic music recording, and then also some of the challenges between, you know, acoustically recording music versus, you know, a crunching rock and roll kind of thing.
Jim, you want to start?
Sure. You know, the thing is, Joe, what I found is you need to record what you like and and you're going to be good at that. I mean, if I were to record rock and roll, it would come out like my version of rock and roll, but it wouldn't be what a true rock and roll engineer would do. I mean, we can tell you when a rock and roll engineer has recorded a jazz project, because, you know, the relationships just aren't right and the sounds just aren't right. And so it really comes down to that. And also, you know, working in the studio, it's a long, hard process, and even as short as it might be. But you need to work on music you like to work on and you are good at working at, because you will just be miserable if you're kind of with people that, you know, and also that's the thing, the people you're working with, you probably won't get along with them because this just isn't your crowd. And so, you know, I can work with just about anybody in the jazz world and get along fine with them, and even the classical world. And because, you know, I've listened to a fair amount, I know what it should sound like. That's the other thing. It's, you know, we both have a good sense of what the history of this music. I mean, we're like putting the next step on the ladder on this music. And so, you know, we know what it sounded like in 59 and 60 and 70 and 80. And now we are in 2025, and we're kind of doing the next version of this kind of music, and we're showing what is possible, and trying to, you know, we really get off on really great sound. And so it's really fun to actually kind of say, oh, doesn't this sound great? It's very funny, you know, we'll play our stuff for the kids at NYU, and they'll say, well, why does your stuff sound this and our stuff doesn't sound that way? Well, you know, there are things that we're doing, and you know, especially when it comes to stereo summing and all that kind of thing, or even quad or 5.1 and 5.1.4 and all this kind of surround stuff. In that, you know, we still have a lot of analog in our work. And but we're using digital to actually record it, but we're still kind of mixing in an analog state. And there's just nothing like that. I mean, there's a richness that you can get. Ulrike?
Well, I would say it's also the language we speak. I mean, there's sometimes, you know, even between American classical and European classical, Jim and we have to explain to each other what the subtle differences are, and or what European jazz versus American jazz is. But so we've been trained in that. It's kind of ingrained. We speak the language. We can speak the language to our clients, and they understand. In rock and roll, I would have actually probably problems even understanding sometimes what they want from me. So that kind of defines also who you want to work with. Then I had the fortune to work in you know, these famous European halls, so I have a sense of what acoustic I like, what can I do. And in 2020 during the pandemic, I mean, Jim and I actually did a project with Jane where we recorded basically in closets, but we were able to give it the acoustics that everybody expected it to have. So we've kind of mastered even the technique of having no acoustics but putting it on it. So it's kind of, that is something we can do. And we have also research people in research and development who help us achieving this. I'm just not as good in other styles of music. So that's kind of what informs me better doing acoustic music. Yeah.
I can think about
Good.
100 rock. I can think of about 100 rock albums that I'm going. I would have taken a chance. I would have just like you guys to have been recording them instead of whoever it was that do a pretty good job. I've just got one more quick question because we're actually out of time, but I've got to know this because I think for our audience, it makes a difference. Does high resolution does that help you in your craft? Or would you just rather be back at 1644? There's so many people that just go, oh, 1644 is fine. I'm going, you're not an engineer. How could you know that?
David,
So as an engineer,
we got off the plane just a couple of days ago, and we were loading the car, and I turned on the car. We're driving home, and I turned on the jazz channel on Sirius satellite radio, and on came a Patty Barber track. And it was recorded at 352 and mixed at 352 and mastered at 352. Now they're probably playing, an MP
12 kilobit. I mean,
yeah,
really.
they're probably playing an MP1 at that point.
Right.
And you know what? It sounded to me better than anything I hear on that channel because it started out with a super resolution track. And yes, the better that you have to start with, the better it goes down. Patty has an S that can really go into distortion and all that kind of thing. This S goes, I think Ulrike read it up to about 160 kilohertz or something like that. And the fact that we're actually capturing that entire S of her, and it just is all right there. And we don't have to truncate it to actually kind of get it down to normal as if we were recording it 2496 even. So, we found that this 352 thing is really, we love to offer it to clients to say, look, this can sound amazing. And we can really offer you all this quality. And if you don't go for it, but we have it there to offer.
I mean, also a CD that's made of a DXD recording sounds better than a CD that's made of a 44.1 recording. I think in short,
Very
that's
true.
what Jim says. And then you have all these other formats that you can offer people. So I'm a big fan of even if the client doesn't, or if they in the end only want a 2496 copy, I would still record in DXD because we have so much better ways to manipulate the sound if it has to be. And the other thing that what Jim meant is like if you have a sharp S, then you have to put in maybe an extra, plug in an extra DS or an extra something that you don't need if you just get it clean. And that in the end, all these steps will make the end product sound better, even as an MP4 and an MP3.
guys, this has been fantastic. I'm so sorry that this is already up. We've run out of time, but Joe and I would like to invite you both back to do just a Jim and Ulrike hour, and we can get a little deeper into some more of your really cool stories. But thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, anytime. Yeah. Good to meet you, Joe.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Good to meet both of you.
Okay.
Joe, God, how did that hour pass so quickly?
I learned a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're just wonderful people, and I'm so appreciative of this of them being on our show. Tell everybody about our next show, Joe.
Yeah, so next time around, we're going to start digging into the basics of streaming. There's a lot of our audience who stream all the time and others who really haven't embraced that as yet. And David, you've got so much background in it. I'm looking forward to learning a lot next time around as well.
We're going to have a good time. It's always, it's all about the music with us. We certainly appreciate everyone being here, and thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.